Okay, welcome to the June 2025 FMDiSC meeting. We have a really good meeting this time. We've got Jake Johnson and Chris Moyer and Joseph Petty, who will return soon. And really interested, it's like all web all the time, with a dash of AI thrown in. So it's a good mix of things. We're going to ask people during the meeting to mute yourself unless you're actually interacting and asking questions so that we don't get background sounds. And we used to do a thing at our in-person meetings where we would have new people stand up and introduce themselves, give us a very brief overview of who they were, how they came to FileMaker, how they use it. And what I'd like to try this time is, if you're new or we haven't had an opportunity to meet you, is that you put that information into the chat so that we can all see it. If you want to join our, it's pretty low noise mailing group, put your email in there and we'll sign you up. We'll invite you to join the group, and then you can have a way to directly get in touch with us. So let's get moving on the meeting. Jake Johnson from Angel City Data is here with us, and he is going to talk about a web rubric, all the different ways that you can enable FileMaker on the web. So Jake, please take it away.
Sure, thanks. Hello, everyone. Let me get my screen working here. Nice to meet you. My name is Jake Johnson. I am the Director of Design here at Angel City Data. I think this is I don't know if it's my 5th or my 6th FMDiSC prezo, but I always love being here. So it's great to be back. Again, I work for Angel City Data. We're proud of our platinum badge. I think well over a decade at this point. Along with that comes certification in all available versions. Now there's new certifications that we've gotten as well, but we're well certified. We are very proud of a few excellence awards. We're a relatively small shop with a few awards. Our first being outstanding technical support. One of the things that I love about this company is that we've all been here a while. Our retention's really good. And what that means is, for customers, typically the person who built your system is going to be the person who answers the phone when you call, which our clients really appreciate and we've been awarded for. We also won Partner of the Year for the Americas. Dave likes to say that we were the best FileMaker shop on 2 continents, which is great. Proud of that. And then my personal favorite, given my title, we won for Design of the Year for one of the first systems I worked on here solo, which was thrilling. Outside of the Claris space, we also just run a really good. Dave runs a really, really good shop, and that has awarded us the Small Business of the Year award here not here, but in Burbank, which we're really, really proud of. It's about 12,000 small businesses, and I think 2 or 3 times now we've been selected as top tier, which is fantastic. Personally, for me, been a FileMaker developer for 15, 16 years, which I know isn't quite as long as some of you, but been doing it a while. I am a father of 4 boys. I think we're done. I don't know how it keeps happening. It's a mystery. But love them. I've got a almost 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So we are deep in it right now. I'm tired. In my free time, I'm a musician. You can see in the background here, there's a lot of instruments. It was cool to see Joseph as well. Good to have another musician presenting today. Outside of that, I love being outside. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It rains a lot, but it is beautiful. There's rock climbing, hiking, fishing, hunting, all the things that I love to do. So happy here, and that I get to work in a California-based company and kind of spread things over to the East Coast. So what we're going to cover today is it's not the end all be all, but it is our shop's experience in extending FileMaker applications to the web. This is sort of a recycle of a presentation I gave at Engage last year, 2024, in Austin, and with some additions, given some releases here in the recent months. You know, I think we all probably understand that it is time to get to the web. We've sort of been in our FileMaker shell for a while, and things are just moving really fast in the web space. For our company, it is a rapidly growing part of our business. Every year, it's multiplying to the point where we're looking at having to hire some developers at this point because I can't handle it all. So it's a good problem to have, but it's growing significantly. From a business perspective, which is typically how we like to approach things, we always kind of walk through with our clients, why would you go to web and why now? We try to present them with potential use cases. Sometimes customers come to us with use cases. Sometimes it's internally generated here. Why would you want to do this, and what would you want to use it for? And whenever we're discussing with clients how to do that, we always go through some platform selection. So there is a lot of ways to skin this cat. How can we do it? And why would we do it that way? And as I'm sure a lot of you know, there is a variety of methods here. We're not going to cover all of them, but there is a safe assumption during this talk that the methods that we are reviewing assume that FileMaker plays the backend data layer role in the stack. Just because so many of our clients come from the FileMaker space that, it makes sense for us to do that. So today, like I said, we're not going to discuss everything. There are, of course, more, but today we'll go through how we look at WebDirect, how we look at it compared to full stack web applications, and then a newer platform, not new, but newer, called FMBetterForms, as well as why you might want to choose one or the other. Of course, like I said, there are others, but we're going to kind of stick to those three today. So when we're discussing with either potential clients or existing clients, why you might want to go to the web, the answer is really simple. It's everywhere. The ubiquity that the web has achieved is absolutely insane. I think as of 2023, it's probably higher now, but 2023, 71% of businesses have established web presence. Now, that's just all businesses. When you look at small business, it's more like 98%. So everyone is online in some capacity. I think a more impressive number here is that 30%, and this is as of 2024, 30% of all business activity, transactions, things like that are now conducted online. Massive number from where it was 10 or 15 years ago. I was going through my slides earlier this morning, and I gave this presentation last year. And the next number has grown quite a bit, which is kind of crazy. 68% of the world is online. It's 5.6 billion people. When I gave this last year, I think it was 64%. So 4% a year is pretty wild. So why go to web? Well, there's business is being conducted there. All the people are there. It's a natural progression here. So absolute ubiquity is the easy answer. When we're reviewing with clients, what potential use cases might be, we haven't found one we don't like yet. These are just some that we've worked on, whether it is some sort of invoice portal or a customer portal for our clients, vendor quotes being collected, etc. We have found some really, really interesting ways to extend FileMaker business apps and solutions out to the web. And when we're walking through this process with our customers, we really look at three of the proven options, just that our shop has employed over the last several years. The first, of course, is going to be WebDirect. It's the low hanging fruit here. It out of the box. So we always, it's at least a part of the discussion. The second is going to be something more in the full stack space, which is always going to include, some degree of HTML and CSS, whether it's traditional CSS or post CSS like Tailwind or Bulma or something like that, as well as some kind of an action layer, a JavaScript, React, Vue, Next, jQuery, something like that. So that's the second option that we review. And then this third option that really has sort of popped up for us, I'd say over the last 3 or 4 years, is FMBetterForms. And we're going to go into that. If you've never heard of it, really interesting platform that we're working in a lot. And when we're looking at these three options, we try to provide some kind of empirical, data. We are database nerds, so we like to have a rubric. And in case you don't know what the word rubric means, which I know it's kind of a weird one, rubric is really simple. It's just a set of guidelines to assess a task. So how do we measure a task or performance or a product against this? And so we always go through this rubric when we're walking through the experience with customers of how to get to the web. And within that rubric, we measure against 6 key principles. The first being, of course, security. I'm sure Wim would be very happy to hear that. Our customers' data is precious, whether or not it's in the medical field. I think a lot of times it's easy for us to go, oh, HIPAA. Well, it's really not just HIPAA. It's polite to keep people's stuff safe. And so we always consider, user data. It is the really the flagship of the rubric. We want to make sure everything's safe and secure. We always discuss scalability. So the role that scalability plays here is interesting because it introduces a few other questions. Who are our users? Where are they? How many of them are there? Do we know them? Do we not? Those kinds of things, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But how well does the platform scale if it needs to? Is the second thing that we consider. The third, compatibility. No one ever really scores super duper high on this because, thank you, Internet Explorer, and others. It's almost impossible to be fully compatible with every browser for all of time, Netscape. But we do our best. So we really want to consider whether or not the apps that we're working on are going to be compatible with our user groups, devices and browser choices. So it's something that we consider, during this process. My personal favorite of these considerations is going to be user experience and design. We kind of have a unique opportunity when going to the web to have a level set, a reset almost of what users have come to expect. We are afforded a lot of controls in FileMaker that we've come to leverage over the years. But with this explosion into the web, users are expecting more. Modern controls, things like sliders and range steppers and, you name it, day pickers, calendars, those kinds of things. Users are, there's this expectation that applications will sort of at least meet the standards of what they're used to seeing on the web and responsively and with relatively low lag. The next one I think might be something we talk about more than any other principle here, development and maintenance. So this comes into play, we have really good retention here at Angel City Data. Not everyone does. The world moves really fast, especially in software development. It's really important to us that the systems that we build be maintainable, adaptable by a wide pool of developers. So, who can fix this thing if it goes down? Who can we trust to make adaptations based on customer feedback, etc. It is a massive piece here. We have built some things where there's one guy who can fix it, and that's always kind of scary. So we want to make sure that as many people can fix this thing as possible. And the final piece of the rubric is very important, performance. I don't remember exactly the metric here, but I think it's something like 3 out of 4 users on the web will completely ditch a website or web app if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. That's a crazy number. And the fact is that they don't have to put up with what we provide them. There is a multitude of options and tools for them to look at and use, many with free trials. So if your application isn't performant in the web, it's already several steps behind. So we very carefully consider how performance is going to impact our customers' experience. So now we're kind of going to dive into each one of these principles into deeper detail. The first being security. So we're going to break down the three options and how they sort of stack up against these principles. In terms of WebDirect, honestly, minimal effort. When you're looking at security in terms of effort, how hard is it to make this thing secure? WebDirect stacks up really well. There is a ton of built-in features that we take for granted. It's easy to take for granted because we've always had them. Things like user authentication and encrypted communication and data at rest and those things that just come out of the box that we really don't need to worry about because Claris has already worried about them. There's a degree of manual setup. We do need to install, an SSL certificate, which if you've ever done, is a really fun process in FileMaker. But relatively little effort when it comes to WebDirect, which is why in this particular principle, when we're measuring against security, WebDirect scores a clean 5 stars here. We really are afforded a lot of built-in tools that are easy to forget about and important to consider in this process. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got full stack web apps. And truth be told, this is a major effort. There is nothing that's built in here. Of course, there are tools you can leverage that make things easier. But if you're just spinning up a full stack project, you really don't have anything at your disposal until you start installing things. So 100% of all this is manual. So when it comes to the data API, we need to make sure we're configuring our layouts properly, that we're leveraging secure communication, that we have token-based authentication that we need to worry about. Our API calls need to be written responsibly. We have to configure our cores properly, which is always a fun experience, and we need to deploy to a secure environment. So the full stack is the absolute opposite end of the spectrum from WebDirect. It can be built secure. It does not come that way. And so we consider full stack to be a major effort in the security space for this particular rubric. It's absolutely doable. Takes a lot more time, a lot more effort, right? And then our third option, we got FMBetterForms. I would say this stacks up moderately in terms of effort. There is still some manual configuration, but we do have quite a bit built in here. Authentication is built into the stack. BetterForms leverages hash credentials and JWT tokens, and we have a serverless deployment environment. It works seamlessly with FileMaker security, and it's leveraging the secure FileMaker data API. So that all comes right out of the box. Really don't have to do a whole lot to get there. There are absolutely some manual processes we have to go through, like configuring account privileges and ensuring that page authentication is toggled on, but it's really just a setting. We just kind of tick a box and it's taken care of for us. So when you're looking at security, we've got FileMaker, which is super easy. We've got full stack, which is not easy at all. And then we've got BetterForms, which kind of lands right in the middle at about 3 stars for us. So in terms of security, WebDirect takes the cake here with BetterForms trailing at 2 and FileMaker, full stack at the 3rd spot. So we'll move into the next principle here, which is scalability. Hugely important. Will it go to 11 for all my Spinal Tap, hopefully, fans out there? When it comes to WebDirect, this is a contested topic. I'm just going to speak from our experience on this. I'm not really going to wish casts on anything here. I'm really just talking about what we've seen. Our experience is that WebDirect is moderately scalable. Claris claims 0 to 1,000 users. We have not tried that. We have tried 1 to 200. with success. It has worked, and it's been relatively low effort in that sort of space. Of course, there are considerations to take into account here, like solution complexity. When we're dealing with very intricate calculations or layouts that are very complex, or deep relational mapping that the layout, sort of depends on, the scalability downgrade can compound quite a bit. We can mitigate that in some ways. We can optimize FileMaker server. We can, give the machine some more resources in terms of hardware. We can horizontally scale. But it's it's a challenge for sure. So in terms of scalability, I would put WebDirect squarely at about a 2.5 star, just right in the middle. It again, can it go to 1,000 users? Apparently. Have we done it? No. I don't know if any of you have. I'd love to hear your stories about that. When it comes to full stack, this is an obvious one. Maximum scalability. Obviously, you know, full stack web applications power the web. Bank of America, Amazon, you pick. Obviously, those go above 10,000 users. Again, this is just our experience. We've built some applications that do deploy up to about 10,000 users with really no hiccups. It hasn't been a problem for us. One of our web applications powers um, the Parent Teacher Association of California. So that's a lot of people, right? And we really don't ever have any support calls there. It's sort of just plug and play. We don't have anything in terms of layout dependency in the web. When we decouple from WebDirect, everything is most of the calculations are going to be performed in the front end layer, and FileMaker is really just going to be used to serve up sets of data. That means lower server traffic. It means we're able to leverage things like JavaScript, which is incredibly fast to perform intricate calculations. We are not depending on the FileMaker calculation engine really at all. These things really, really help with scalability. And it's going to put full stack at the top of the list, I'm sure, here at 5 stars. This is an obvious one. Go Amazon.com. There you go. Everybody uses it. It's totally scalable. The interesting one here is going to be BetterForms. And I would not put BetterForms on the scalability level with a full stack web app. I would say it's more along the lines of a high scalability application environment. We have a lot of the advantages that we get with full stack, like we're not dependent on layouts. We are totally decoupled from the back end. We can perform calculations on the front end layer, which is far faster, and we have less chattier server traffic. However, based on our firm's experience, we have not deployed past 10,000 users here. Actually, I think it's about 5,000 users. That being said, we do have an app that on the regular scales up from 0 to about 2,000 users in about 2 seconds. And we never have problems there. So in terms of scalability, BetterForms has really, really sort of fit the niche for us, just given how it stacks up in other areas of the rubric. But in terms of scalability, BetterForms is going to be at about a 4 out of 5. Could it go higher? Probably. Do we have experience with going more than about 5,000 users here? No, although BetterForms claims it can. So it'd be interesting to get some kind of a job where we could try that out. But that's how it stacks up in our experience right now. The next step when we're considering which platform to go with here in any customer conversation that we're having is going to be compatibility. Browsers have feelings. Browsers are opinionated. Some browsers prefer CSS in one flavor versus another. It can get a little nuts when it comes to compatibility and trying to be as compatible as you can. How does FileMaker stack up here? Moderately, I would say. It works well great-ish in Safari. It works great in Chrome. Firefox is, quote, supported. Microsoft Edge is improved. I'm not totally sure what that means. These are official statements from Claris. Our experience is that on mobile browsers, it's very inconsistent. We get a lot of reports on our WebDirect systems with drop-down lists that don't behave as you would expect them to. Occasional sluggishness on various layouts. That's probably due to more complex calculations, relying on the back end to have to perform calculations and serve them to the front end layer as opposed to the other way around. The infamous flashing layout screen problem that's been reported, inconsistent layout objects, some things that you put into a WebDirect layout work great when you open them in FileMaker Pro and not so great when you open them in WebDirect. I think probably everyone here who has built a WebDirect system has experienced that. And so that kind of, when we're thinking about compatibility, we tack on a who is our user group, who are these people that we're serving this to. And when it comes to a user group, WebDirect, we really, really like to stay to a known user group. We would typically not deploy a solution on WebDirect if it was an unknown user group. There's just too many things that we are unable to control here. We don't get any say over unknown users' browsers or OS or anything like that. So we want to make sure that our users are known to us when we're deploying to the web using WebDirect. And so that kind of lands WebDirect in a 3 out of 5 stars for compatibility. It is supported, and honestly, most of the time, it's fine. It's just that when it's not fine, it's very weird, and our users complain about it. And so that's why it's best if we're deploying to people that we know, that we can say, hey, can you go ahead and try this version of Chrome, or please don't use Samsung, their browser, or Opera. That's another one that we get a lot. So we like to know who these people are. That way we can help support them. When it comes to full stack, obviously your compatibility is going to be extensive. There are some exceptions. If you're using a lot of frameworks or packages or libraries, some of those will need to be checked against browser versions, although most common web browsers support most frameworks, or I should say that the other way around. Most frameworks support most common web browsers. But there are some inconsistencies, and you're going to need to test quite a bit to make sure that what you're building works. I have about 6 different browsers installed on my phone, and as many as I can get on my computer, and I try to test as much as I can in the applications that we build, and then I run through testing with our users as well. And so to the point of users, who is using a full stack web application when we build it, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. It could be known, it could be unknown. We certainly don't know everyone involved in the California State PTA, yet they're using an app that we built, and with really no support issues there. So that's definitely a high ranking for full stack web apps. I'd put it squarely at a 4 out of 5. The reason it's not a 5 out of 5 is because there is an unlimited world of frameworks, packages, libraries that you could install that might conflict with browsers, or that will conflict with a browser version today and not tomorrow because the library gets updated, etc. So it's tough to really know exactly. But 4 out of 5 stars, pretty solid. When it comes to the BetterForms platform, I would say this is one of the areas where it's going to be hard to draw much of a comparison between full stack and BetterForms. So compatibility in our experience with BetterForms has been very extensive. It stacks up exactly the same as a full stack web app, but you get a lot of stuff out of the box that we'll talk about here in a minute that make it easier to build in. So just like full stack, BetterForms is going to come in at a 4 out of 5. And the only reason it's not a 5 out of 5 is because your mileage may vary with frameworks, right? With packages and libraries and UI controls and things like that. So that's how compatibility works in these conversations for us. The next I could do an entire session on, but that's not what I'm here for today, is user experience. One of our mantras here at Angel City is that happy users are productive users. We all chant it religiously in robes, holding torches in a cave. It's what we're all about. And so this one's near and dear to
I
me.
want to attend those staff meetings.
They are pretty exclusive, so we might be able to get you an invitation. But Dave will have to okay that. So they didn't even bring me in until 2 years in, so it's pretty intense. For WebDirect, I mean, I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat this. This is where WebDirect is going to fall short a little bit. From a user experience standpoint and UI standpoint, I would put WebDirect in the mild category. Um, yes, it ships with FileMaker templates. Those templates are updated rarely, if at all. They certainly aren't what I would call the most modern, uh, it's in terms of UI design. We are limited in interface controls to what FileMaker allows us to use. Which means that we have a finite control set that is going to be inconsistent with what users expect in a browser. Okay, so FileMaker users not equals web users. There are things that people have come to expect in terms of UI controls in the web that just simply aren't available in FileMaker, thus unavailable in WebDirect. We have no access to things like controls, range sliders. Our drop-down calendars have stayed the same for as long as I've worked in FileMaker. So those things are a drawback here. We don't have any access to the behind the scenes or under the hood CSS. We really can't install easily any modern UI frameworks or web libraries, and responsive design is a mixed bag. I mean, yes, we are able to build various layouts that cover different devices. That means we have to now support, if there's 3 devices this system supports, we support 3 different layouts for every device. If a field gets added, we have to add it 3 times. The second Apple decides to ship a phone with a different screen size, we have to adjust for that. It's a pain. So WebDirect, I would say, from a user experience standpoint, how easy is it to create something beautiful and usable that leverages controls and paradigms that users have come to expect in the web? I would put WebDirect at about a 2.5 star. Yes, there are templates. Yes, there are things that make this easier, but in our experience, it's on the lower end of the totem here. On the other side, again, obviously, full stack, you can do anything you want. However, nothing is included. There's really nothing out of the box. You're going to get baseline web UI, which sometimes is fine. It's if you use Safari like I do, you'll know what I'm talking about. The sliders that are just the little blue dot on a gray line that you can sort of slide back and forth. There's your baseline web UI that comes out of the box. It's just an input type in HTML. It's no big deal, but you do get it, and that does come with the browser, and users will know what it is and they'll know how to use it. Is it going to win any UI design awards? No, but it is consistent with what, at least from a paradigm, what users are used to seeing. However, you do get unlimited access to modern UI frameworks and web libraries. Those, of course, are going to require knowledge in those frameworks and libraries. In order to employ responsive design, it is built in, but it's going to mean you need to know things like, pick your flavor, Bootstrap, Tailwind, Bulma, things like that are going to make your systems feel at home regardless of the device that they're on. In terms of interface controls, totally customizable. So like I said, that blue dot on the gray line, for us to use CSS, whether it's traditional CSS or post CSS, to customize those controls to be more consistent with what users are used to seeing in modern web applications. So in terms of user experience, the sky's really the limit on full stack. 4 out of 5 stars, simply just because it doesn't include really much of anything. You are fully responsible for the look and feel, essentially past or beyond the typical web controls. So full stack at a 4 out of 5. So where does that leave BetterForms? This is another area where I personally think that BetterForms performs better than a full stack web application. So I would put this in the maximum UX space. It does ship with templates. So you spin up a new app, you pick a template. Um, they have a variety of templates to choose from. Every template ships with Bootstrap and Tailwind support. You still have access to modern UI frameworks and libraries. You can insert those in your DOM header. Responsive design is baked in because Bootstrap and Tailwind are supported, so very easy to use columns and flex and things that we're kind of used to using in the web at this point. Just like full stack, your interface controls are totally customizable, so that you can really make something boring like a slider feel exciting and feel fun to use. The coolest thing I think, especially for new BetterForms users, is that it ships with snippets, and it the barrier to entry when you're getting into BetterForms, I'd say the hardest part is just really knowing where you're at. Like, okay, what can I do here? How do I put a multi-select, for example, into the page? Well, the good news is that on the left side of the app, there's a searchable list of snippets. You search multi-select, you copy the JSON code from multi-select, you paste it into that part of the page, you feed that multi-select the data options that it gets, and you're done, and it's there. And it's you can have multi-select with multiple options and enter to deselect and things that users are really used to seeing. You can also customize those snippets. So a lot of built-in stuff right into BetterForms here, which is why, from my perspective, what we've been able to build, I've been able to build some stunning interfaces and applications in BetterForms. So clean 5 out of 5. Far and away, in my experience, easier for me to build something beautiful, usable, for people in a relatively short period of time. So 5 out of 5 stars. The next area that we get into, like I said at the beginning, is something that we talk about quite a bit. And it's the development and maintenance. If you build it, it will break, and if it breaks, you will fix it. So how do these three areas stack up here? In terms of WebDirect, I think this is going to be one area where WebDirect comes in higher than others, and the answer there is obvious. It's a minimal effort platform. We all know it. It's familiar to any FileMaker developer. We get a massive amount built in here. I'd say this is probably this and security, I would say, are the two areas where WebDirect is going to come in with so much built in that it's easy for us to forget about it. Something really simple like a data viewer and a script debugger or a PDF engine, those things just come out of the box and we have to do nothing to get those. And that means that we're not leveraging any kind of plugin for that. We're not leveraging an outside or external framework. Any developer knows how to get in, how to adjust, how to maintain, how to extend. In terms of integration, I would say it's great with some caveats. The API surface for WebDirect is not the greatest, but it's there. So in terms of maintaining or fixing an application that's been built in WebDirect and is being served to a group of known users on the web, definitely the least amount of effort here. Okay, so 5 out of 5 stars for sure. Wipe your hands, be done with it. If this is all your client cares about, then this is what you should build it in. When it comes to full stack, this is the opposite end of the spectrum. Again, this is going to be a super high effort for you unless you have a full-time employee or two who this is all they do. The ease of development here is going to require deep knowledge of every single piece of the stack. So you're either going to need one person who knows everything or multiple people who specialize in individual areas. The upkeep in terms of packages and versioning, security patching, got to really stay on your toes there. Easy for those areas to break, and you get a call at 2 in the morning from a client going, why does this not work? And you have to pretend like you know what you're talking about. And you don't, which is stressful. No one likes that. So definitely higher in terms of effort here. We do get some built-in tools depending on the stack that you choose, but by and large, no. Now that being said, integration here, we're seeing a ton of systems integrate with APIs with other pieces of data. Unlimited integration here, obviously. So whereas WebDirect stacked up at 5 stars, the full stack in terms of an effort when it comes to fixing things that break or adapting things to customer requests, this is a 1 star. For sure, if this is the most important thing to your customer and to you, WebDirect is going to be the clear winner here. But where does BetterForms stack up? We've kind of been pitting WebDirect and full stack against each other and then seeing BetterForms in some areas be sort of the sweet spot. And I'd say that here it's a mild effort. You do get access to a lot of the FileMaker built-ins because it's so tied to FileMaker. It is JSON based, which I would say, I think it's safe to say in 2025, most of us FileMaker developers are comfortable with JSON and how it works. It's very, very simple. You do get access to an extensive code snippet library, which means that if anyone's kind of been in the BetterForm space for a minute, they know the snippets when they see them. You do get tight integration with FileMaker. The developer tools are very good. Every BetterForms app ships with a developer tool button that kind of floats in the bottom right-hand corner that allows you to inspect your data model as you change it or as it loads, or just to see what's happening. That can be turned off when you go to deploy, but it's very, very helpful. The other thing that's really helpful here is that when you make a call to FileMaker, BetterForms ships with a helper file that sits alongside your production file. That helper file receives a payload from the web app, and then you can jump right into script debugging from there. So you're able to take everything that comes from the web and walk through it in FileMaker in your scripting, in actual FileMaker scripting. This is huge. We use it. In fact, I'll be using it as soon as I'm done here in a couple of other client systems. So there are debugging tools available, and we get unlimited integration as well. So this is an area where BetterForms sits in a sweet spot. It is not as minimal in terms of effort as WebDirect is, but I would put it at about 3.5 stars. So almost there. You know, it because it's extended outside into the web, there are some unknowns, and that's why it gets docked here, but pretty darn good. I think the final aspect here, the final kind of principle of the rubric, is going to be performance. This is an area that, like I said at the beginning, a lot of people will just, I think it's 3 out of 4 users, will just dump something if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. It's not worth it. It's not worth their time, which sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And it's something that we should consider when we're building anything in the web, especially things that we expect people to pay us for. So in terms of FileMaker WebDirect, how does performance stack up? I would put it in a mild category. In our experience, can be quite a bit of lag. The lag and the load time is affected by development practices. So there are things that you can do to speed up the user experience here. But it is deeply affected by things like calculations and relational data, etc. The other thing you have to consider is end user device. So, where are they using this? And when, right? So that is a big deal. There are a lot of reported issues here with mobile browsers. In terms of full stack, well, let's talk about the stars. 2 out of 5. It's mild. It's not the worst, but it's certainly not the best. We've seen a lot of issues, just to be honest. In terms of full stack web applications, these are going to be high performing, but the caveat there is that it really still depends on you as a developer. You are not affected by intricate calculations unless you're serving them in the data layer from FileMaker server. You do get access to modern tools, languages. JavaScript is incredibly fast. It's sorting, mapping, filtering, etc. Your data is decoupled from the front end. That makes it far and away easier to build something that feels snappy, to build something that feels responsive. But it is going to depend on your development skills. In terms of your end user devices, the apps you're going to build here, by and large, are going to be fully responsive, and you've got desktop speed parity on mobile. You really can build something that will perform, apples to apples with good network and reasonable bottleneck. You're going to see pretty much speed parity desktop to mobile. So that's stellar. I'd give full stack here about 4 out of 5 stars, just because there's still a lot of things you'll have to do as a developer to make sure that your applications are snappy. When it comes to BetterForms, is this a sweet spot? And I would actually say it's not as much of a sweet spot as it is exactly the same as a full stack web app, just with lower barrier to entry. Yes, it is going to depend on your development practices. Yes, it is going to be dependent on your server speed, and how fast that server responds from a call, an API call. But your data layer is entirely decoupled from your front end, and you're not relying on FileMaker to serve any calculations. This is big. So it is fully responsive. You've still got the desktop speed parity. So this is one of those areas where BetterForms and full stack really are one and the same in terms of their grade here. So those are our 6. And I thought it would be interesting to it's easy to sort of get lost in the weeds, like, oh, 2 stars here and 4 stars there and 3.5 stars here. Where does everything stack up? And just to kind of review, we talked about 6 key principles: security, scalability, compatibility, user experience and design, development and maintenance, and performance. And where FileMaker sits in all those areas, there's everything. You notice a couple 5 stars. That's actually, I think, one more than anything else gets. So certainly not something to ignore. When you look at it versus a full stack web application, you'll notice 1 5-star area there, scalability, and versus BetterForms, you still only have 1 5-star there. So better WebDirect, I think it's easy to kind of look at WebDirect and kind of throw it away as an option. It shouldn't be. It should definitely be a consideration. It's just that you should measure it and see what's most important in this deployment to the customer and to you as a developer. And so our averages, when we look at all 3, we've got about 3.5 stars for WebDirect. We only have 3 stars from the full stack environment, and we have 4 stars from BetterForms. So they are pretty close. But like I said, these principles, some of them will be weighted more heavily than others in these conversations, right? And naturally, typically at this point, we'd have a customer say like, okay, well, let's go with option 2 or option 3 or option 1. And then naturally their next question is always, okay, well, what's it going to cost me? And, this is an area I don't really have to talk a whole lot about here because you all, I'm sure, already know. But in terms of FileMaker WebDirect, it's rolled in. There is no additional cost. It's really easy, but beyond the development cost to build it, there's no extra licensing here. When it comes to the full stack, again, it's nothing. It's past your development time. Now there are some costs that can come from using frameworks and libraries. Full calendar, for example, I think is like $49 a year, something like that. So there can be costs if you choose to use external libraries. When it comes to BetterForms, the starting tier is about $588 a year. I think it goes up to $1,700 for a full. You can either use it as a vertical application deployment platform, or you can build multiple apps for customers in it. But there is a licensing cost there, so that's definitely something to consider. Although for $588 a year or whatever it costs, the amount of time that we save in development at our rate versus the full stack is significant. So, and I do sort of want to highlight, if you've never heard of BetterForms, and you're wondering, can award-winning or or notable apps be built in the platform. I just want to say that last year, actually for about 2 years, on the Claris homepage, was an application that we built for one of our customers that does have a FileMaker backend and some user interface layers to it, but is largely built in BetterForms. So Claris totally recognized this solution that we built as top tier in design and performance, and it was largely built in the BetterForms environment. So it is possible, and just speed to market is huge there. So I just like to throw that in there because we actually didn't know that that image was going to be on Claris.com, and then one day it was. So cool to see. But that application was for a client of ours that was built in BetterForms. There are alternatives. So most of that is what I talked about last year. Studio is still relatively new. And still is relatively new. But I do just want to call out Studio as an alternative. It is viable. There are several advantages to it. The development time to market is astounding. You can really get something built very, very quickly in Studio. It does have a lower initial cost because the licensing is tied in with your existing FileMaker licensing. It's got an integrated ecosystem. It's all under one roof. Claris, supports all of it all together. It does ship with disadvantages as well. The scalability in our experience is relatively minimal, although I'm sure that is just our experience. I'm not saying it is minimally scalable. I'm just saying our experience. There are some functional and user interface customization ceilings. Controls look the way controls look in Studio. There's really not a whole lot you can do about it. I would love to see that in some future iterations of Studio. Just as a UI UX guy, I'd love to be able to see that. There are some integration gaps here with Studio, although possible. There are some gaps that pop in there. And then what we've seen is the enhancement of the platform. Although it's about 3 or 4 years old, the enhancements have been they've been there, but I wouldn't say that the pace is astounding. And thus the adoption rate has, I don't think, been quite what we'd like to see. Although, some of the recent changes might change that. I hope they do. I'd love to see more people use it. I'd love to be able to work in it some more. But I just wanted to make sure I included Studio as an alternative here because you wouldn't believe the comments that I got last year with like, didn't talk about Studio at all. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's just not something that we've that we've really worked a whole lot in because these other three areas tend to be where we sort of turn. So I want to call it out. The other alternative I do want to call out is WordPress because I know a ton of shops like to work in WordPress and integrate with FileMaker as a data backend. There are advantages here. The ecosystem for WordPress is enormous. The themes and plugins that you get access to are huge. You really can almost build an entire website using themes and plugins. Pretty crazy. The content management is really simple. So if you build something for a client, it's still CMS. They still are allowed to go in and write, most of whatever they want to, right? A blog post is super easy for them to ship. Those kinds of things. There are widespread tools available for WordPress. So there are a lot of pros here. There are also quite a bit of disadvantages. The integration layer here is fragile. We have a few clients who are on WordPress integrations, and I would say 2 to 3 times a year we're having to go in and make adjustments because either a plugin was updated or changed or deprecated or something like that. So the middleware here does require ongoing maintenance. WordPress is infamous for it's not really meant. It's not optimized for super complex data models. It's just not. It's not set up that way. Although it can be used that way, again, it's going to require ongoing maintenance. I like to call this out because it's very important from a security perspective. WordPress is an enormous attack surface. It's huge. Just like Windows, just like Android, most of the world is on WordPress. That makes it a viable target for people with malintent, right? That it is a thing, it happens. And then lastly, from a UI UX perspective, it still is just a CMS at heart. So that has some UI and UX implications for sure. So something to consider there. I didn't include it in the rubric because, well, to be honest, didn't have time. But I wanted to make sure that we went through Studio and WordPress at the end just to make sure that you understand that there are advantages and disadvantages to using it, that I know a lot of people who use it with great success, and it's something that should be considered as well. There are other alternatives. I'm curious to know if anyone here is using anything else. Would love to hear those stories. So I didn't have time to include everything we've ever done in here today, but these are by and large the things that we've worked on, and that is it. I've got some. I'm not sure what time it is, but maybe we have some time for Q&A. Maybe there's some comments. But thank you.
We do have 10 or so minutes for Q&A.
Awesome.
So, you answered almost all my questions.
Perfect.
Anyone?
Can you bring up the scalability slide again? Just for a
Abs-
second, you take a look at it.
Yeah, let me hold on. I gotta hold shift. Boop, 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 boop. There you go.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
You know, one of the key points about scalability, you know, Jake talking about deploying to 1,000 users. One of the other caveats that goes with that on WebDirect is that generally requires multiple worker machines. So you're throwing akin back to the FileMaker Unlimited and a redundant array of inexpensive computers. You're basically throwing hardware behind the scenes to kind of reach some of those metrics. I think some of the other platforms don't require anywhere near that much
Yep.
hardware investment.
That's true.
One other point that I want to make, I went to Claris Engage this year, as you know, done for the last bunch of years. There were two words that I didn't hear mentioned hardly at all during the entire conference in any of the sessions, the keynote or whatever. I didn't hear the words WebDirect come up at all during the course of the conference. So an interesting thing is, you know, notwithstanding some of the other components of the platform, the AI, Connect, Studio, and so forth, the keynote didn't feature it. There were not any product features about it, so it was deafeningly quiet. If you're sitting in the audience going, is there anything going on with WebDirect? It didn't seem like there was a whole lot to report.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not certain what's going on there, but I guess we'll see.
Maybe they're just going to buy FMBetterForms.
I've made that case.
Should be a capability of the platform. Yeah.
I have made that case. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I thought I heard someone maybe with a question there.
Yeah, this is Taylor. I was mentioning I have, like a lot of you guys, I got a lot of clients that are in the, 5 to, maybe 75 staff type things, and they frequently have customers that want to be able to log in to look up things like invoicing or just give feedback and stuff like that. And WebDirect is an quick and easy thing to set up and do for them. I've partnered with it since I'm not a full stack developer. I've partnered with another guy who will do full stack stuff if they do, but I can say that I've got quite a number of clients that have, their clients can log in and see what their invoice is and hit the, the Stripe or PayPal button and pay. And,
Sure.
And it's quick and easy. It's certainly not as elegant as you can do in full stack stuff, but I think a lot of people don't, when they think, WebDirect, they're only thinking, staff for their internal solution. They're not thinking of interacting with people that are like just customers or something, and or just general feedback stuff. And for quick
Sure.
and dirty, it has solved a number of problems for my clients that didn't want to spend a lot on something but wanted, quick capabilities.
Couldn't agree more. We've done it as well. It's definitely possible. Where we started to kind of bump into the ceiling on WebDirect in situations like those is really when our clients needed kind of top tier branding associated with the web pages that were being served to their external customers. So whether it was a customer portal or an invoice portal or something like that, they needed it to feel exactly the same as their existing website, or they had a very, very tight branding package that they needed. And it became challenging for us to deploy experiences like that in WebDirect, much easier for us to do in the BetterForms platform. I guess my broad takeaway is that if you're comfortable in some light in JSON, if you're comfortable in some light JavaScript, although it can be heavier if you want it to, and if you're relatively comfortable in HTML, give BetterForms a try, because I can spin up a customer portal or an invoice portal in BetterForms in a lot of cases faster than I could in WebDirect. So just I would take a look at it.
And I'll be honest, I have one. It's an SBA solution, but one that I'm looking at that is hit by a ton of. Okay, it's a weird client. They're bail bondsmen, so people are checking in that are that have been arrested and are out on bond, and they're using their phones to check in. And we've got a real simple solution on WebDirect on the phones that's working now, but I think FMBetterForms would serve that a lot better and be more compatible with the various phone things.
Yep.
Because we do run into, I mean, the phone browser stuff, all we can tell people is, there's limited compatibility, but
yeah, that would be that known versus unknown user group, right? So when you're dealing with a lot of people on unpredictable browsers or devices or OSs or anything like that, WebDirect can struggle there for sure.
Yes, we
Okay, I have a couple of comments.
Sure.
When you showed the slide about the percentage of population worldwide who are on the web, we need to point out that almost all those people are on cell phones.
Yep.
They don't have computers or access to computers.
Very good point.
Even in the hinterlands of, say, India,
Yep.
they've got cell phone towers and they've got phones, and that's what they have. So that's what we're working with. Alexi, did you want to ask Jake directly?
So I had one question, which maybe it sounded a little provocative. It really is not meant that way. But so first of all, a couple things. Excellent presentation. I really like your rubric. I like the word rubric. I like your rubric.
Me too. Thank you.
So I think I might add a couple of things. So for licensing, I would really say cost, because development, money is money to the client, right? So if the development costs are going to be super high, the licensing costs are low, the net is money. So that's just one thing. And also I think I don't know if I would call it like, and you've touched on this, but like a whole category for me would be like a use case scenario, right?
Yeah.
And similar to like something Tyler just mentioned a second ago. So I have a solution that is FM client based, for the main users, and then WebDirect for a whole other group of users. And what they do in the system is limited to just, a couple of activities, right? So when I'm scoping whether what kind of web interface to use, I would say the use, besides the number of users and their browsers and whether they're known or unknown, like all of those things, I think the use case scenario, which also might be, I think it would apply to all three, whether it's BetterForms, full stack, or WebDirect. I usually really make a point of like interviewing the client pretty thoroughly about that before picking
absolutely
one or the other.
Yep.
And then my somewhat provocative comment was, if you're doing full stack, why use FileMaker as the back end?
Totally reasonable question to ask. The answer is that a lot of our we are traditionally a FileMaker shop, which means that many of our longest clients have enormous data sets in FileMaker already. And so where we've seen the business grow is not so much only in new clients, although that is a major segment. It's legacy clients who are they don't have the appetite to move from FileMaker altogether because they trust it. They trust Claris. Their licensing has been hammered out. A lot of times they'll pay for 5 years in advance and they're good to go. And so really sometimes where if someone was coming to us fresh with nothing existing, we definitely would consider a full stack with something like a SQL backend or a MongoDB or something along those lines. But when they've been in FileMaker for 25 or 30 years, it's lower hanging fruit a lot of times to go, hey, nothing changes in your office. Okay, your office stays exactly the same. The people who've been working there for 15 years are going to work with their data exactly the same way. We're just going to be able to push this out to new users in new ways. I very much appreciate that question because a lot of times it can be easy for us to go, well, we know FileMaker, so let's stick with it. Sometimes that's not the best approach, and sometimes it is. And I don't want to sell this the wrong way. We certainly do build applications that don't have anything to do with FileMaker at all, because sometimes it's the right thing to do. But in the cases where our clients bring us years and years or decades of FileMaker data, the appetite just isn't there to move out of it because they trust Claris and they like the environment.
Yeah, I think that would be the number one reason. Totally valid.
Yep.
Because it's what we know is like,
Yep.
everything becomes a nail because you only have the hammer or whatever, right? That's probably not the best reason.
No, completely in line with you there. That's I try to make sure that I don't assume that we're going to be using FileMaker in any new project at all, and I let the project and the client lead us to that just through what they're really looking for. So that's not provocative at all. I appreciate that a lot.
I think it's interesting. If you get that situation where you go, wow, we've got 50 users in a FileMaker system and they have 125 vendors that need to access, that's one of those things you keep everything under the same umbrella and you choose one of these options that Jake's talking about. I think there are situations where you go, oh, we're a little event management company and we regularly scale up to 4 million users, and yet the management team is only 20. I think Jeremy in the comments kind of has a really good sort of migration path for that is, hey, let's host this thing on a full stack, like, full top to bottom, industrial strength back end. And then we do have to kick the problem down the road, which is now we got to sync that data, right? And anytime you're doing sync, there are caveats associated with that. So yeah, you got to pick your poison at times, like what's going to be better for scale, what's going to be better for integration or simplicity or maintainability. But yeah, you can certainly build highly scalable hosting options that talk to FileMaker, but probably best not served via the native database in FileMaker because of constraints there.
Yeah, if that's Jeremy Brown, and I suspect that it is,
yeah,
I would highly recommend looking at some of the stuff he's done as well with Supabase as a data layer, and that then you can pick and choose if the client has a FileMaker install. We need to get some of that data into FileMaker. It can sit in Supabase as the by and large data layer, and then we can send FileMaker the things that it needs to know about. That's a very good way to do it as well. And if you haven't seen what he's done there, you should.
It's actually amazing how performant the FileMaker API is, or ODEP. I've got a guy that does custom development with me that's talking just with JavaScript, and boy, he can. I was worried that we would run into limitations, and the API end has been a very minimal impact on the service compared to all the other FileMakers.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we used to say the FileMaker find engine was the fastest part of FileMaker, and now I'm just going to give a quick anecdote. We have some customer systems that are serving many tens of thousands of records, sometimes hundreds of thousands of records for one table. And where find is struggling, we're actually using the execute data API script step to go inside of FileMaker and grab the JSON data. And it's so in one particular customer system, it was taking about 25 seconds for the find to execute on a client. And using the data API script step, it was taking less than a second. So your miles may vary, but the data API is, in my opinion, far and away the most impressive thing Claris has done in, I'd say, the last 5 or 6 years. For me, just for my use cases, 100%. Anything else?
Lynn,
Oh, Lynn, I think you're muted.
Yes, you're correct. I was saying thank you so much for a tremendous presentation.
Thank you.
Knowing how to talk to our clients about these issues is really, really critical. Chris, are you ready to go?
I am.
Um,
Do I have the ability to share yet? Not yet.
yeah, there you go.
All right.
So
Excellent.
Chris Moyer is going to give us the news of the weird.
Indeed, I am. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. So, tons of stuff going on. I hardly knew where to start this month. So this is the June edition. I'd like to start off with the late great Bill Atkinson, passed away last week, I guess. He is a legend at Apple. He's an Apple fellow. He created something called Roundrex, which you may be familiar with. So it's basically any sort of rounded rectangle, windowing, system messaging, stuff like that. There's a story on folklore.org about how all this came to be and how he figured it out. And so it's kind of interesting, deep dive into it. He was Apple employee number 51. Steve Jobs recruited him personally. He was one of the 30 team members to develop the first Macintosh. And one reason he's a personal hero of mine is he built HyperCard, which was how I got started in software development. I was an early HyperCard user. And that was arguably the first database in the PC realm. He left Apple in 1990 to join General Magic with Andy Hertzfeld, and later joined an early computer intelligence company called Numenta, which some of you may remember. But anyway, he just passed away, and he was something else. Shifting gears entirely, for those of you who are freaking out about World War III, I thought I'd share an open source intelligence source. For those of you not familiar, the Soviet Union actually used to do this way back in the day. They would keep an eye on the pizza shops, and if something was cooking at the Pentagon, all of a sudden there'd be a lot of pizza deliveries to the Pentagon. And so now you can go on to Twitter/X and find the Pentagon Pizza Report. It's an open source tracking of pizza spot activity around the Pentagon. And you get stuff like this, like, oh, something big went down at 6 o'clock and everyone's ordering pizzas. And they not only track pizza, but also the lines at the nearby gay bar near the Pentagon. So you can sort of figure out if someone's not a pizza eater, but they tend to frequent the gay bar and the traffic's way down at the gay bar, something's cooking. So if you're looking for more news than you can find from regular sources, you now have an open source intelligence avenue. Yesterday was a momentous day. I'm guessing a lot of you bumped your heads when Google Cloud exploded. What was it? Early afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Went down, stayed down for about 3 hours or so. It also nicked Cloudflare, which runs their Warp DNS. For those of you who use the 1.1.1 DNS, that's Cloudflare Warp. They also have a service called Turnstile, which is a CAPTCHA alternative that got taken down because that was tied up in Google Cloud. So Google Search, Google Gemini, Gmail, YouTube, Google Maps, Google Drive, Google Nest, Google Meet, Google Cloud, all of these things were down and down hard for a long time. There is a website called Down Detector, which keeps track of outages, and they had over 10,000 reports of outages. So this was worldwide. Um, I haven't seen a lot of details on what exactly went wrong, but something big went wrong. It was ugly, ugly outage. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot to add here. Oh, also Discord and Spotify got hit. So WWDC, usually a exciting event and everybody's all abuzz, but this year was kind of a yawn. They yeah, sort of their big headline was liquid glass, which is I'll get into it in more detail yeah, in the next slide, but it is a UI presentation approach, and a lot of people are not fans, and I'll touch on that in a second. Apple Intelligence has been opened up for access for developers. ChatGPT is now, I guess, embedded in the image playground. Um, the venerable Game Center is being retired, and a new Games app is replacing that. And we get live translation now. They've also, and I don't know what the chicken and the egg is here, but you know, Claris got into this year naming scheme, and now Apple's doing the year naming scheme here. So I'm sort of curious if this sort of was handed down from on high, or if Apple said, "Yeah, sounds good, let's do that." So now it's iOS 26, macOS Tahoe 26 will be the latest macOS um, incarnations. And Tahoe 26, by the way, is going to be the last macOS that will support Intel chips. So for those of you still driving Intel machines, that's as high as you go. WatchOS 26 is getting a new app called Workout Buddy. AirPods are going to have camera controls. Some new child safety features, like kids having to get permission before texting new unknown phone numbers, which I think is a good thing. Siri was completely MIA in the thing. There was a quote from Craig Federici, I can never remember how to pronounce his name, but his thing was Siri didn't converge in the way quality-wise that we needed it to. Apple wanted it to be really, really reliable, and they weren't able to achieve that reliability in the time they thought. Um, Probably not coincidentally, Apple released a research paper kind of shitting on the large language model reasoning models, saying, oh, they don't really work as advertised and they have reasoning collapse beyond a certain level of complexity and stuff like that. I think I might even have a slide on that later on, but they sort of said, it's not our fault, I didn't do it. You know, we can't use this stuff. But let's touch on liquid glass first. So big visual update. A lot of people said this is actually a throwback to some of the stuff they tried earlier and then abandoned. Um, they're calling it a visual language, and I guess they got it from the Vision OS when they're doing their VR goggles. And so they want to make it sort of consistent across all the OSs. The UI is informed by any surrounding content and will intelligently adapt to light and dark modes. We'll get into real-time rendering and what they call specular highlights. However, if you are paying any attention to social media, some people have thoughts. So this was something on Reddit. And so a company called Acveo had a open source dashboard template called Blur Admin, and this was 9 years ago. And they sort of put it out there, and everybody loved it and said, "Hey, this is really cool." Um, and they had problems. And so let's look at some of the problems. So they said they shared it on Reddit, went to sleep, were famous, but they started running into problems right away as soon as they tried to implement. This was inspired by Iron Man, by the way. So the Iron Man movie said, hey, this is really cool. Let's do heads-up displays everywhere and have overlays. And so, you know, Exhibit A, when you do blurring over gradients and images, you get contrast problems. So you can see in the notification center down here, that's barely readable. It's white on light blue. And so the contrast is terrible. So that's an accessibility problem for people with vision impairments. You also get contrast when you have dynamic backgrounds like a photo. So if you're looking at your splash screen or you're looking at a photo or something like that, and you're trying to put something with, say, white or even black text over a light image or a dark image, you're going to get readability problems. So contrast issues there. Context loss. So you see this one on the left, this one is doable because they've blurred the background to a sufficient extent that you can actually identify where your buttons are. Here, it's almost confusing where buttons start and end because you're sort of seeing them stacked as if they're like in a pile of literal buttons. Again, problematic for people with cognitive or visual impairments. And then this one, when you scroll, you start to lose the boundaries of the controls. And so, again, problematic for people who are, perhaps vision impaired or what have you. So, not a great implementation. And so, they say this is breaks visual cues. So you lose focus states. You can't tell if something's selected or highlighted or what have you, or even where the boundary is. And so lots of problems. My general take from the various opinions I saw was people are not excited. They didn't think it was great. And this was sort of the big news. They didn't have much to say on Apple Intelligence, other than devs can start to tap into on-device models, which is interesting, but kind of not a lot to show for their efforts at this year's WWDC. I referred to the paper that Apple released to sort of crap on the large reasoning models. What are they getting at here? And they talked about a variety of large models, and it's a super complicated paper, but let me give you some of the stuff um, that make it more accessible. They were talking about how a lot of these large reasoning models seem to have cheated on their homework and passing some of these benchmark scores. Like they seem to have been trained, there's data contamination in the training data. So they were told what they would be tested on. And so the test data appears in their training data. And if you give them a novel task, such as puzzles, that they haven't seen before, or puzzles, these are puzzles that can be complexity adjusted. So like this top one here, the Tower of Hanoi, where you have to move these rings, concentric rings, one at a time over to a different post. But the rule is you can't have a larger one on top of a smaller one. For lower levels of complexity, like 3, 4, 5 rings, no problem. These things slam it out. As you get beyond, say, 10 rings, the complexity gets so high that you actually get reasoning collapse. And let me show you what that looks like. So here's some charts here where you have um, deep thinking models versus non-thinking counterparts. Low complexity, they perform about the same, so there's no real benefit to a deep thinking thing. As you get into medium complexity, and here we go, 4 rings, 5 rings, 6 rings, up to 8, even 10, the thinking models outperform the non-thinking model, but as soon as you get beyond 10, boom, complete collapse, 100% failure rate. And so the sort of working memory that's required to hold that complexity in thought is beyond the model's capability, and they just fail at 100%. So Tower of Hanoi, using a checkers jumping test, Blocks World, the river crossing thing where you have like an animal that can eat another animal and you have to transport them across a river one at a time without one animal eating the other animal. Complex river crossing scenarios, they all drop to zero. So um, this seems to be Apple's way of saying, here's why we're having so much trouble with Apple Intelligence. We're trying to get sort of high reliability, strong determinism, and these reasoning models just can't hack it for more complex scenarios. So if you're trying to, say, synchronize calendar appointments for 20 people to find out when you can have a meeting, these things seem to fall down. So interesting paper. If you're into this stuff, I have the link to the PDF of the paper if you want to check it out. But that was Apple's release right before WWDC, and it does not seem to be a coincidence. sort of switching gears to significant malfeasance, this is a super complicated story. I don't even know how to begin to explain it to you, but basically, there's some links at the bottom of the page here. So Meta has been up to no good, and here's what it looks like, just to sort of explain the complexity for you here. So if you have any Meta apps on your phone, and you log out of them and you decide you want to be anonymous and go, I don't know, look up shady stuff on the deep web or something like that. You're using a VPN, you've denied all cookies, all this stuff. Meta managed to back channel your traffic moves and capture exactly what you're doing, de-anonymizing your web movements and associating it with your identity. And in the process, they broke GDPR rules, DMA rules, DSA rules. In the EU alone, they're looking at $32 billion fine, 32 billion euro fine, based on their rules is percent of Meta's global revenue, which was 164 billion in 2024. So they're looking at huge fines. The EU is super pissed. And this was crazy how this was worked out. There's a little demo, which may or may not mean anything to you, but I'm going to play it to you anyway. So this was the proof of concept done by the researchers. So Yandex is sort of Russia's Google, and Meta works with Yandex. And so they were able to sort of back channel Yandex servers to see what the current device user was up to. And so they're getting onto these various web servers. They're going to log out of them. They're in incognito mode, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just sort of fast forward to the punchline. And so they get all the way through this stuff. You can see they're incognito. So they're jumping on these various web servers. And at the very end, Yandex knew exactly where they'd been and associated it with this device's user. And so it was completely de-anonymized, even though they were trying to be in incognito mode on a VPN, deleted all cookies, and yet they were still tracked by Meta without their consent. So anyway, it's crazy that anyone even figured this all out, but some researchers did, and good to them. It's crazy. So anyway, this is called local host tracking, where they basically back channeled communication between these apps in silent mode. A nutty thing. Let's see. Yeah, I think I've done this already. Okay. Oh, there we go. Now we're on the right slide. OpenAI. So they were just on the receiving end of a court order from news organizations saying that they had to preserve all of the chat logs of all of their users, and they have a few users logged in through their API business offering. News organizations were suing over copyright claims, and they're accusing OpenAI of destroying evidence by deleting these logs. And so some of these sensitive chats or user deleted chats had nothing to do with OpenAI deleting anything. So the court ordered OpenAI to preserve and segregate all output log data that would otherwise be deleted on a going forward basis until further order of the court. OpenAI did a filing demanding oral arguments in a bid to block the order, but basically the news organizations are saying OpenAI is trying to cover their tracks, and they're saying we're just trying to preserve client confidentiality. So for those of you who use ChatGPT and other OpenAI services right now, they are currently under order to preserve anything you tell them. So anything you get out of ChatGPT in the next X days or possibly weeks or months will be preserved and possibly subject to a lawsuit. So just don't ask how to make pipe bombs or things like that. Let's see, Oracle. I thought this was just interesting. There's a ton of stories like this with earnings announcements and stuff like that, but I thought this was a good canary in the coal mine sort of story. So Oracle made a ton of money last quarter. And in their earnings report, they said demand for AI and cloud services is unlike anything it's ever seen. So
Oof.
their revenue increased 8% from 12.45 billion a year ago. Net income rose to 2.93 billion. For the current quarter, Oracle expects revenue growth of 8 to 10%. Analysts were expecting growth a little lower than that, but the last bit here about the data centers, they have 162 data centers today, and they're expecting to possibly hit 2,000 of those suckers. So that's a lot of data centers, and that's a lot of revenue that those data centers will be throwing off. So Oracle is not unique in this regard. So Google's making this kind of money, Microsoft is making this kind of money, Amazon is making this kind of money. So data centers are printing money these days. Couple recent FileMaker events just happened. Elevate in Toronto was at the end of May. For those of you interested in sort of seeing what went on there, you can do so. Vienna Calling in Vienna, which was the successor to the .fmp conference that used to be held in Berlin, was done. Some people, I'm sure, on this call were there. I was there. Heidi was there. Great conference. They absolutely captured sort of the spirit of the old conference, first night at the beer garden and catching up with everybody. And then it was an unconference where there was no set schedule. They just had open time slots, and anybody who wanted to present something just sort of grabbed one and said, I'm going to talk about this. Come if you want. And so it's kind of a nice free for all and great content, great session. So it's a good thing. And I had gotten away from this for a while, but I thought it was high time I resurrect the upcoming events. By the way, Portage Bay also keeps a list of upcoming events. So if you want to go to the Portage Bay blog site, they have a running track of the list as well. If you're ever looking around for when is that conference going to be, they've got it. So that's more power to them. So Build, Grow, Learn coming up, the German FileMaker Conference in Melbourne. The Rome FileMaker Week is now being held in Naples this year, and it will be the Naples FileMaker Week. And so there's 2 days of International English Language Conference, 1 day of FM Italia, Italian Language Conference. Reconnect Melbourne, I think it was in Sydney last year, or maybe the year before. The Full Access Conference that John Howell is working on, and that is in Los Altos, not too far from Claris headquarters, and then Engage You in November. So those are the conferences coming up. And then last but not least, Claris Explorer Labs. These are free events. They have their schedule on the community, and they have a introduction to generative AI in Claris FileMaker on June 20th that some of you may or may not be interested in. And that is all I've got.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Sure.
Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to make a short announcement before we go to our breakout rooms. I want to make an announcement on behalf of the entire board. Our fellow board member, Jonathan Reff, is going to be retiring from his board duties. And we want to thank him from the bottom of our hearts for all his years of coordinating meetings and guiding policy. His friendship and advice have been invaluable to all of us. In a moment, I'm going to ask Dave Knight to say a few words, since Dave knows JR the best, I think, on the board. But we have been actively interviewing community members and several exciting candidates to join the board, and we'll be telling you about that at next month's meeting. So Dave, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, I, again, this organization goes back, I think we're 26 years in right now. Jonathan, absolutely one of the early pillars of, I think he got here at year 2 or something like that. I think, Jonathan, we met you, I think, at an Apple or a Mac World.
Macworld, yep.
Yeah.
In 2000.
Yeah. So he's 26 years in. on this as well. So number one, he's been an active member of the group, doing multiple presentations, really interesting, thought-provoking stuff. Just as a seasoned member of the group, he's been really instrumental in helping other younger developers or people maybe a little less experienced at doing the presentation. He's been a really good mentor in that respect as well. As a board member, there are times I just got to say, as one of the evergreen board members of this group, there's been times when we want to take a shortcut or we want to do the lazy approach. I don't want to do. And Jonathan is the one that's like, nope, this needs to be high quality. We're FMDiSC. We need to do this. This is not a user group. We're not going to go on the low end. We're going to always shoot for the high bar and try to bring the highest quality of content to the FileMaker community. He's been just a great asset for our team. He's put in, decades of effort on this group. He's a friend. He's a smart guy, and we're going to be sad to lose him on our board. So thank you very much, Jonathan, for all the years of dedication and effort you've done on the back end of this board.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Lynn, for the nice words. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve on the board for all these years. Yeah, it was a Macworld event in the Bay Area in 2000, and you were working in I guess it was probably the Claris booth then, showing off some FileMaker stuff, and we just got to talking, and you said, oh, once a month we get together in our offices, and I started coming to those meetings, and then that was really the
We couldn't get rid of you.
inception of this group, which has been such a wonderful community, really, for so many friendships, so many collegial relationships, so much information has been shared over the years, and it's just been fun to be a part and help to steer that. And I'll still be coming to meetings. But just stepping back from my duties as a board member just felt like the right thing at this point. So thank you, everyone, and be seeing you soon.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hey, Lynn.
You're muted.
Yeah, I know. I keep doing that. Mike Ross had
Yes.
a short announcement about full access.
Yes, as one of the co-organizers of the Full Access Conference, we welcome you to take a look at what we have to offer. Our website is at fullaccess.us. I'll just bring that up on the screen. Oh, I cannot show my screen. So that's been disabled, apparently. But we do want to tell you that we've got 26 sessions already going on. It's fun, Chris announced it was from October 20th, 23rd. So we got a lot of content, and we are also involved very heavily with developing community and putting on the sort of sessions that you might not see at a large venue like Claris Engage. Sessions that are panels, sessions that are interactive. We have the more traditional sessions. We have a lot of work life sessions. We'll sessions on how to do presentations, something that we saw in an earlier phase on error. We like to think ourselves as an unconference. We're perhaps a little bit more structured than that because we're really working hard to build a full schedule and for you to get the most out of your time for the week. We are running out of single rooms. Will be gone soon. We still have double rooms, so registration, if you want a single room, it's a good time to get on board with that. We're keeping costs down. Whole conference and a single room for the entire thing is under $1,000, which I think is a really great value. Some of the things that we also wanted to highlight on this is that there's been a lot of interest and evident in this meeting on WordPress. We will have also a premier session on integrating FileMaker with WordPress, and we are looking at one, possibly two, introductions to WordPress that are not so FileMaker related, so that developers can kind of dip their toes in that water. Another session that seems to be drawing some interest is How do we cultivate user groups? This is one of the healthy user groups left, but COVID killed the user group, and there's a lot of reasons for that, which we won't go into right now. But how can we revitalize this? What does it need to look? What kind of form should it take? I'm looking at you, Rick Coleman. Hope that you will make an appearance and contribute to that as well. We tend that to be a panel discussion. We also have a scholarship fund, and there are some videos on the webpage if you'd like to look at. You can also preview what some of the sessions are that we're doing. A couple of weeks, we will start actually have a session scheduled so that you can take a look at. But primarily, I think we'll have 40 plus sessions running 3 at a time over the course of the day. So I think it'd be a great event for you. And I also wanted to mention, just kind of tack on to what Chris Moyer was saying concerning the WWDC, is that there were 2 things I think of significance to FileMaker users. One was the iPad OS bringing in full menus. I think that might have some implications for FileMaker development. And the other one is that the Spotlight will now have be able to track your history of clippings, what you copied and pasted, so that you can have more than one thing that you can access from your scrapbook. I think that might be really cool. So the website is at fullaccess.us. So I really encourage you to take a look at that. But that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any other announcements? Okay. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. We'll be in there until about 10 minutes to the hour. I urge the board members and Jake and you, Mike, to pick a room, talk about your full access. Jake, you can talk more about your web rubrics, and anybody else can move from room to room as you please, trying to recreate more of the experience of our in-person meetings. And I'm going to stop the recording for this time. Resume recording. Welcome back from the breakout rooms. I hope everybody had a nice time. We have with us now Joseph Petty from GreenFlux. And I had a slightly mistaken title for his presentation on the announcement, but the real one is AI web viewers and AI integrations. Joseph, I've made you the co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
All right.
Take her away.
Okay, do you guys see the presentation here?
Yep.
All right. Apologies in advance if there's any problems with the audio cutting out. It's raining and I've had intermittent internet issues today. Actually, I want to kill the camera just to help the bandwidth here because I don't want to ruin the recording. So, all right.
Well, we'll be patient if you drop out. I'm just going to remind everyone who's not speaking to mute themselves.
Let's see. Sorry, I've got a bunch of windows here. I'm trying to get everything lined up. Okay. So can you guys see this? The FileMaker experiments?
Yep.
All right. So quick intro before we get started. My name's Joseph. I'm the head of developer relations for AppSmith. And I also started a consulting business and focused on FileMaker completely, was just only doing FileMaker at first and then kind of branched out and got into a few other platforms. Lately, I've really been getting back into FileMaker though. So that's me in the background there shortly after I joined the AppSmith team in 2022. So a little background before I get to the actual experiments here. So about 20 years ago, I was a reactor operator in the Navy. That ancient looking panel there is actually the same one that I worked on. And I was an instructor in the nuclear program as well. Had the same job as Homer Simpson. I actually got to start up a reactor for the first time when I was 25. So after the Navy, I worked at a national laboratory here in Tallahassee. It's satellite campus of the Los Alamos National Lab. So it's here in Florida, but part of Los Alamos, and then there's another satellite campus at MIT. So I got to start up the world's strongest magnet years ago, and it set a Guinness World Record. I got to do the test startup, unfortunately, not the one where Guinness was there on site to certify it. So my name's not in the book on the record, but I did do the initial test startup there. It was featured in the BBC, so that was pretty cool. And while I was there, I got to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was getting a tour of the Mag Lab, and I heard a familiar voice and looked up, and he was standing right behind me in my office one day. So that was pretty cool. That's the distributed control system in the background there, the 8 screens that controls all the power supplies and cooling water for the magnets, and that's what I operated. And then we used FileMaker for the log there. There were a few other things, but it was mainly our daily log. And it had a lot of things that needed updated and fixed, and the person that built it wasn't around anymore. So I taught myself. I started making small edits to it. People started hearing that, hey, we got somebody that can do FileMaker now. And so then suddenly there was a big backlog of things they wanted me to do, and I had to teach myself how to build all that stuff. So I really enjoyed it, though. It changed my job a lot there once that happened. So then I started freelancing. I was getting side work, and that took off, and the side work started paying more than the full-time job. So in 2016, I left the Magnet Lab and started my own company. I did FileMaker only for about the first 5 years or so. I got into AppSheet before Google bought it. Shortly after they bought it, I found a bug in AppSheet and managed to get in the Google Bug Hunter Hall of Fame. So that was pretty cool. And then I switched to AppSmith, which is where I'm working now. So it started out just I was looking for a platform better to integrate with APIs and make web apps, and started doing like some blogging and tutorials about it, and it got their attention, and one thing led to another, and the CEO called me up and offered me a job. So they wanted me to come make the tutorials for them, and I've been doing it for 3 years now. And just this past year, I took on the head of developer relations role. So that's a little background of how I got here. I learned a whole lot about web development and front end and AI and API integrations in the last few years working with AppSmith. And just this past year, I've kind of been getting back into FileMaker and realizing a bunch of stuff I used to think was impossible years ago that my customers wanted. I realized it is possible with web viewers, and integrating different APIs or AIs. So it's kind of gotten me back into it just as a hobby and trying to see what I can make it do. All the stuff I wanted to do years ago, it's finally possible. So that's what this set of FileMaker experiments is about. I have a GitHub repo, and it has all the sample files in it. So everything you see today, you can download from the repo. They're mainly web viewer, AI, and API integrations. And these are all proof of concept files. They're not intended to be complete solutions. So they're good starting points, and they show you how to do a specific technique or integrate with a certain AI or API. So feel free to build on top of them. There's, lots of things that still need added to make it a complete solution, but this should get the hard part done for you. And each one of these has a blog post that goes with it. There's a link to each post for each file in the GitHub repo. And it actually started as a blog first. And then after 2 or 3 posts of trying to figure out the best way to share the file, and not wanting people to have a Gmail account to download it from Drive or whatever, or Dropbox. So I decided to make the repo, and now every time I write a new blog post on FileMaker, I'll add it to the repo and link the blog post. So there's the link if anybody wants to copy that. It's the organization is GreenFlux LLC, and then FileMaker-experiments. So with that out of the way, we will get to the first experiment. All right, I've got several windows I got to bounce back and forth between here.
Joseph, I just wanted to add for everyone that that link is also in the announcement of the meeting, so you can have
Cool.
access to it there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, first one we are going to do is radar. API. This is a location services API, and similar to Google Maps, a lot simpler to use. Maybe not quite as many features like business listings and reviews, but it's got navigation, address autocomplete, a bunch of that type of stuff. And so what I've built with this one is you got this pop-up. I can start typing an address, and it's going to autocomplete based on what's close to where I'm currently at. So I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. Apparently, there's no 300 North A streets in Tallahassee. Again, there's none. So it's auto-completing based on the user's location, but it has access to all the valid addresses in the US. I think it has Canada as well, but I have heard some people mention that it didn't work for their country, so maybe Google Maps is better in some instances there. But basically, you get this list of autocomplete as you're typing, and then you can click one of these, and it saves that address to the field. You can also save each individual data point, like street number, name, city, all that stuff, to separate fields. Again, these aren't complete solutions, so I'm just trying to figure out the tricky part and then go on to the next blog post, basically. So I'll show you how this one's connected. So you got this pop over here, and you start typing, and you can see we've got a script trigger in the input field where you're doing the autocomplete to type the address. And then there's another script trigger here when you select one from that autocomplete list. So we'll look at the first one here. As you're typing, it is when you first enter the field, it runs this check while typing. And I wish I could zoom in on scripts, but all this does is install a timer for the get address matches script, which runs every 0.7 seconds. So if we go check that out, I wrapped this in an if statement just to make sure there's at least 5 characters, so I'm not hitting the API for nothing and trying to autocomplete something that's like just the street number. And then run the insert from URL. This one, I have the API in this field back here in the background. There's a global field that you can paste your API key into. So that'll build the request. And then you can see I'm setting this variable with the results. It is a global variable, and it's just the JSON response. So when that comes back, there's going to be a addresses array in the return, and it's an array of all of the possible results for whatever they typed. So that gets saved to this global variable so that I can access it and put it in the portal. When you click out of that field, then we just clear the timer. And when you select one of the addresses in the results, then it's taking that row that you clicked from the portal and saving it to the actual address. Or sorry, just taking it this way. The results API, it's saving that back to the contact address field. So as far as scripts, it's really simple. The one thing tying all that together, then the missing piece here, this portal is displaying records from a table that radar results here. And I'm just using a calculated field. So this table only has 2 fields. There's the index, which is numerical auto enter. And then there is a calculation that looks for that radar results array, that JSON array that's global variable. And it just takes this index. So it makes row 1 of this table that would otherwise be empty. It makes row 1 pull the first element from the JSON, and row 2 is the second. And so every 0.7 seconds, that array of JSON is updating, and the rows in that table are updating this display here. And then when you click one of those, it saves it back to that field. So that is the end of the first one. If there are questions, feel free to jump in. I'm going to keep going if I don't hear anything. And a few of these overlap. There's several like kind of similar techniques throughout them. So we may end up answering it anyway as we're going. All right, chat FMP. So this one is a chat interface for OpenAI Assistant. I set up an assistant, integrate with it, and then send an API request. So it's similar to that chat, like you're using ChatGPT. I kept it simple, and I'm not displaying a whole history of messages. It's just the most recent one. But let's see, I can create a new record. We'll call this one FMP, and I'll say, tell me about FileMaker. And so that's going to send this to that OpenAI assistant, get the response back, and then just save it to this field. Not much else going on. It's pretty simple. It's just a different interface, instead of using ChatGPT. So this one's text only. It sends a text prompt. It gets back a text response here. So let's look at the layout first. We got a script trigger here. So on save, when you save this field here, that's the prompt, it's going to run add message. But before that happens, there is a script trigger on record load. So when you first create a record, I've set this table up so that every record in the table is a new thread, a new conversation with the assistant. And so when that record first loads, we'll look at that script first, create thread. Here's part of my API key. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. So you paste in your API key here and the assistant ID for your assistant. You have to create an OpenAI API key and assistant. Paste those two values in here. And then when a record loads, it looks to see if there's a thread ID yet. So there's like a dedicated field for the thread ID. If it's empty, it's going to keep going. If there's already a value, it'll exit right here. So then it's just creating an empty thread. There's nothing in it. Its sole purpose is to get a thread ID so that you can start a conversation on it. And so that happens when the record loads. And then here is where you actually have the conversation. So this builds up a JSON object for the body. I build up a JSON object for the curl options. And then I'm using a custom function here for curl instead of writing instead of like having to do the escape quotes every time. So I will show that real quick. Now, this is not by any means like a comprehensive custom function that's going to work for every type of HTTP request. It was just what I needed this solution, so I could not have to mess with the back escape quotes. But basically, this makes it easy to pass in a method. So do you want a post or a get? What are the headers and what's the body? And you can pass those in as JSON, so you're not worried about trying to parse out, commas or spaces or whatever. So that's it. It sends it off as it adds a message, and then you have to run the thread. So this is specific to the OpenAI API. Create a thread, add a message to the thread, run the thread, and then you have to continuously check for messages, a response from the AI. So the first time you run this, you're the last message in that history because you just sent a message. The AI is not done responding yet. So there's like one message, or maybe there's three if you've responded a second time or whatever. So it keeps running this on a loop every 1.3 seconds here, looking to see if the last response, if the role is equal to the AI assistant responding. If the role is still the user, then it's not done responding yet, so it keeps this loop going and eventually gets that last message to save it to that field. So that is the end of that one. Again, if anybody's got questions, jump in. Otherwise, I'll keep going. So next is sortable FMP. Let's see. All right, so everybody at some points wanted, had a customer ask me if they could make a portal where you can drag rows around, and it's just not something that FileMaker supports. I know there's some decent workarounds with like arrow buttons, but you've got to click it multiple times to make it go up so many rows, or you could type in here and tell it what row you want it to go to and then let that refresh. But, what people really want is just to be able to drag and resort the rows. So that's what I built here using this sortable JS library. It uses a web viewer and parses through the records in the current found set, builds this display, and then as you drag and when you let go, it's sending that data from the web viewer back to FileMaker so that it can update the order on all of these fields. So this is the first one I'm going to show here with some web viewer code, and I've got a separate code editor to show it here because it's really hard to see everything in here. But basically there's a field called Task Web Viewer, and that has all the HTML and then a placeholder that says SQL result. So I'm substituting out that placeholder with the SQL that I want to put there. And I've made another custom function here to make this more reusable. So instead of writing a separate execute SQL every time and telling it to always use these delimiters so that it doesn't break, instead of that, I made a custom function so it's always the same delimiters, and I can split that out and then use this on multiple layouts. So that substitutes in the SQL part. We'll look at the custom function. And so this is just doing that concatenation. You don't have to do this if the field name is all lowercase and has no underscores or spaces or whatever, but it'll break if there's an uppercase character or whatever. So with the FileMaker SQL, if you wrap it in the quotes, then it will look for an actual field like that with that casing. So this just keeps me from having to mess with that every single time, and then make sure that the delimiters are the ones that I'm looking for and to split that out. So then the last piece of this is, you see this text editor as well, right? Sortable. Yeah, can you guys see this? I don't hear anyone.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so pretty simple. It imports the sortable JS library, just a tiny bit of CSS, and here's that SQL result. So declaring a variable, it's a placeholder string, but then that gets inserted here. That gets replaced with, it's still a string when it gets inserted, but it's going to be from the results of the execute SQL. And every row is separated by a pipe. So then I can turn that into an array by splitting here. Now that I've got individual rows, I'm going to map over, or for each on those, and create the individual line items or the items in that unordered list. So here's the empty list. It's an unordered list tag with the ID of items. Go over each one of them and split it by the comma this time. So first split by pipes for the rows and then by commas for the fields. And then I'm adding that, setting the inner HTML, creating the element, setting it as a span with that text, and setting this data ID to get the position. So as I'm mapping over these, it's going to grab the elements from the data and put them in sequentially, but then you rearrange stuff. And so the ID can be consistent, and then the data.id or the data-id is your other one for the index. And so then there's this sortable, when you want to actually initialize this and create a draggable sortable element, right? It starts out as just HTML, but it's not sortable yet. So you run sortable.create on that element. And so right there, I'm saying document get element by ID. So get this outer list and turn it into a sortable UI, right? And one of the options you can pass in is the onEnd function. So when the drag ends, I want to run this function. I start out declaring an empty object, loop over the items, and get their new position. So update that data.id with its current index +1, and then call the FileMaker script and pass in that new order. So that is everything going on in the web viewer, and then it gets the new order when you release the drag. And then this script, just a single step, it is updating that task ID field, or it's using the task ID to look up the current position. So the script parameter that gets passed in, it's an object with a bunch of key value pairs of this ID is in this position. This ID is in this position, right? So each one has the task ID as the key or the lookup value, and then it returns the new position. So I'm running replace field contents on that order field. And I know replace field contents can be a little dangerous. You got to be careful where you run this. This is running on the current found set and only on that field that is dictating the order. And so if you had a constrained found set and you drag some stuff around and then you do a different found set, your order is not going to be right. It's not a perfect solution. You might want to have different layouts or different order fields for, different view types. But this is the basics of how to get a draggable sortable list. Okay, what is next? CSS grid. All right, another common request. Plenty of customers back in the day that had asked me to build this, and I told them it was not possible in FileMaker. And a couple years later, I learned some basic web development stuff and realized a lot of this stuff is possible. So this is just a simple CSS grid. There's no library being used for that part of it. I'm using Bootstrap for the buttons and stuff, but as far as it being able to reorder and create the grid like that, that's just normal CSS. So let's see, we'll look at the HTML on this one. So I'm importing Bootstrap. That has nothing to do with the grid working. Then the grid itself is just display equals grid and then how you want it to wrap. So I want them to auto fit instead of being a fixed width. I want them to size to fill up the space with a min max of 100 pixels and then one fraction. So like if there are 5 rows across or 5 columns rather, then it should be 1/5. If you size it to their only 4 fit, then it's 1/4, that one fraction. And then there's some CSS for the individual items within the grid, but the majority of all that auto resizing stuff is right there, that little bit of CSS. So then I make an empty div called grid using that same substitute and SQL trick from the previous one, splitting the rows by the pipes there and splitting here for the individual fields. And then I just loop through and build the card view for each one of these and assign the function, the action for those buttons. Now, the buttons don't actually delete or edit, but they do call separate scripts. So it takes each one of those, adds an event listener for the button, and then calls the FileMaker script with the ID of the button that you clicked, and then the action that you clicked, whether it was edit or delete. And so if I click the delete here, it says ID 7 action delete. And if we look at the function here, or the script rather, I'm only showing it, just showing a dialog of the parameter. So if anybody wants to copy this, you can look at what the parameter is and decide if you want it to delete that record, or maybe it's a navigation action, or maybe you're going to open a popover with that field selected, or whatever you want to do. This gets the ID and the action that was clicked outside of the web viewer and where you can do something with it in FileMaker. All right. Looks like we're doing all right on time. We're about halfway. Next, we got a choropleth map. All right, so this is using Leaflet.js. It is similar to a heat map, but a choropleth map is where the regions that are shaded are a map instead of a grid. And the color scale or intensity, it's like that whole shape. So there's another type of map that is a heat map, and it does look like a geography map, but they're not shading the entire state. They're going to like shade only, the area that is individual data points, basically. Anyway, so here's a choropleth map fed off of this data here, and you can see like Colorado is really dark, right? It's 4 digits here. We'll take that down to 57, and then you can see how much lighter that just got. So it's live updating real time from the data in your file here. Very similar to the other ones, using a substitute on a input HTML kind of template field. This one, I've got a few different things to swap out. And so first I grab the HTML, which is stored in a layout object that's off the screen. So I'm getting the content from that. And then there's the GeoJSON text, which is the defining shape for all of the states. And then there's the actual values for those states coming from FileMaker. So it substitutes in those three things. And to give you a better look at the code here. All right, importing CSS, importing the leaflet.js library, some real minimal CSS there. You got a div with the ID of map. And let's see. So then I'm substituting in those couple of values, the GeoJSON data. So that looks like this. You've got an array of objects, and each one of these objects is a feature that has an ID and a name and could have a density. This data set I took it from had that. I'm not using it. And then there's the geometry, which is another array. So it's a several 3 or 4 level array here. We got the outer features where each feature is a state. And then there's another state, and then each one of these has all these coordinates. And so that's just to create the shapes. And then you have values inserted here coming from FileMaker for the intensity, like the color scale or whatever. I don't think I got any kind of click actions on this one. Oh, here I did a color scale. So if you wanted to adjust like the high or the low number or the color that goes with it, you could do that right here. I think that's about it. The rest of this is just initializing the map and passing in the data to it. So kind of some specific stuff to leaflet, but that is that one. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then over here is the layout object where I'm extracting the HTML from for the first variable here, and the GeoJSON text is stored right here, and then the third value is coming from that file. All right, next, code mirror. All right, after building so many things in FileMaker web viewers, I was getting really frustrated with the development experience, trying to work with, HTML and CSS and JavaScript in FileMaker. It's just not made for it. It's not a code editor. And so I was constantly copying and pasting code back into, VS Code or Sublime or whatever, just to get the color formatting and the indentation and to make it easier to work with, autocomplete, all that kind of stuff. And so I figured there had to be a better way that I'm not bouncing back and forth. So I built a web viewer for building web viewers. So the left side is a web viewer showing code that's stored in this record that I'm on. And you can edit it right here. So if you see on the right side, that's item 1. I'll make it item 10. So this is live code, editing it as a code editor here on the left in one web viewer, and then displaying it on the right in another web viewer. And the one on the right is literally just displaying that field. So code mirror doc, that field is a HTML. That's the one that we're viewing on the left. And then on the left side, we're again using that get layout object to store the text, the HTML, and inserting that, inserting the editor text placeholder from the actual code that you're seeing here that's rendering the web viewer. So we'll go back to here and look at the code now. Code mirror. Okay, so this one, some CSS, importing code mirror itself. And then with code mirror, you have to import every library, every language that you want it to be able to display. There's a different plugin. So I'm importing the one so that I can display HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and XML. If you wanted to do Python or any other language, it's easy. You just have to add that value here and then include it in the button. So I've got this select dropdown, and I can change what formatting I'm using here. And so if it's not actually JavaScript and you apply it, it's, it doesn't look right at all. But if this was a JavaScript file, that would help and display it properly. All right, and then when you click save, let's see. I'm creating the code mirror text area here. So code mirror works by just grabbing a document, an element that is a text editor. If you give it any element that's a text area, and say, let editor equal code mirror and then give it that. It turns it into that code editor, but you have to do something with it when, the user clicks save. So it's not, you got to get that data out of there. So I add the save button, add an event listener to run a function, and pass the editor content, which you can get right here using editor.getValue. So I pass that to FileMaker. And like a lot of these, the script is super simple. It's just grabbing a parameter and saving it. So almost everything's happening in the web viewer. And I think that's everything on this one. Oh, Olama chat. Okay. This one, let me make sure I've got this up and running. So this one uses Olama, which is an app for Mac, Windows, and Linux to run models locally, to run an LLM locally on your device. It works without internet. I'm going to have to keep it connected for this, obviously, or you guys will lose me, but you can totally disconnect the internet and have this connected to FileMaker and have an AI chat that can access even images and generate responses like that, totally offline. So I've got Olama running, but I don't have the actual model running. Let me get a terminal window here. So if I do Olama list, this will tell me what models I currently have installed, and I want to run this one. And you can specify which version as latest if you want, but you don't have to. So I'm going to say Olama run, and then that model. And if you've never ran a certain model before, if you haven't downloaded it yet, when you run the Olama run command, it's going to download that model. So you'll see a bunch of stuff before you get to this prompt send message. You'll see all the files being downloaded and extracted and starting up the model. But then the next time you go to run it, it'll just immediately run. And so now I'm just giving it a text prompt. This is an image model. It's also a little slow running locally on a MacBook and trying to process images. So I'm not going to test that any more than we have to. Just wanted to show that you can chat with this in the terminal. And this AI is running locally on my machine right now, and it can answer questions about FileMaker. So while I've got that running, get chat, which one? Olama. All right. So while that's running, I can create a new thread here. I'm going to take a picture of this folder.
Joseph, you're dropping out. So your sound is dropping out pretty seriously.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was having internet problems earlier.
It's working fine for me.
I'm fine here.
Okay.
Maybe it's me.
So I'm putting this picture of this folder. I just took a snapshot of this folder here. I put that in here and I'll say, tell me about this image. And this is a little slow. The image one, especially, and running on a laptop, it's pretty cool that it works, honestly, that you can run an AI model locally and have image recognition and multimodal like that. But yeah, we'll have to wait here a minute. So it's transferring the image using the base64 to get the container, and then the prompt. And other than that, it's really similar to the chat FMP one that I already showed earlier. And I will show the script here in a minute. I just want to let this transfer finish. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. It's just a different endpoint. It's sending it to localhost to interact with that model that's running locally instead of to OpenAI. And I'm sending the image data instead of only text. But other than that, it's the same app, and it took me like 2 minutes to build on the old one and turn it into this one that works with a local AI and with images. So hopefully this will finish here in another minute.
Joseph, I've been playing around with this one, and I put in stuff like receipts from stores and things like that. And it sort of, if I said, tell me what is on this receipt, It had no trouble with international languages. It would translate from German or what have you. It would itemize, list off what the store was, what its address was, what the date of the receipt was, and sort of break every piece down. So I think it would be fairly trivial to adjust this and say I would like the input in, structured JSON if this happens to be a receipt or, whatever it was. But this is an interesting thing for someone who has to deal with, different kind of container documents, maybe like weight tickets or receipts or PDF, invoice PDFs or what have you, and then just sort of branch it and say, if this is an invoice, give me this. If it's a receipt, give me that.
Yeah, definitely.
Possibilities. And I love the way it was effortless in handling, different languages.
Awesome. Very cool. Glad to hear it, man. So like you saw, it was a little slow, but it got it right. It says it's a screenshot of File Explorer window and the hierarchy and displaying, like listing some of the files that are there. So,
It's
yeah,
lying. It's lying to you. It says the title bar is File Explorer.
ah, yeah, yeah, it's not quite 100% accurate, but it definitely saw the image. It's not totally making stuff up. So, okay, let's see. Two more. Web Viewer Copilot. All right, so this one's very similar to the first web viewer one. The first one was manual though. It gave you a place to write code and then display the result. This one is a combination of the chat FMP and the web viewer one, where it's going to write some code using a prompt and then save that back to the database and then display it. So let's go over here, do a new one. And I'll ask for a GitHub style heat map. All right. So the assistant wrote the code, the script gets the results back, parses it out. There's usually some code fencing blocks around it you have to remove to get it to display right. Saves that here and then displays it. So the majority of this app was already built from the last one. It didn't take a lot to modify it and tie in the OpenAI assistant. So we'll look at that real quick. There's a script trigger. So add message, same as the other script. I mean, I literally built on top of the same file. So when you add that message, it is slightly different. Let's see. Oh yeah, I'm clearing a couple fields, inserting the value from OpenAI here, running the message. I think most of this is pretty much the same. Here's where I have to remove those backticks. The response tends to come back as 3 backticks, HTML, line return, and then the code, and then the 3 backticks at the end. So I'm stripping that out, and then just saving it to the field and displaying it. So the rest of it, the logic or whatever, that's different than the first one, that would be coming from the OpenAI assistant. So over here, the chat FMP one just says you're an assistant embedded in FileMaker. And then the code mirror assistant one tells it that its job is to write HTML for UI components in a FileMaker web viewer. So it's a little more specific, but they're both just 2 OpenAI assistants that I'm sending a prompt to. Okay, that is almost the last one. What is note graph? Okay. And this is probably one of the craziest ones. Started out, I just wanted to make a markdown editor, and I did some sample data of Star Trek, and then I just kind of got carried away and built the LCARS display and this knowledge graph. It looks kind of like a solar system or whatever. So originally I was only going to build this part. Markdown editor, so I can add a header here for Markdown, and it displays in real time, and you don't have to click save. That's the cool thing, is the instant you type it, you're seeing the preview over here. And I can do full preview, full editor, or the split screen. And then each one of these is like a record where there's a couple data points up here you can view, and then the main content. So this layout's more for writing the Markdown. And then here is viewing all of those notes and how they're connected. So each one of these is a tag that is mentioned in the notes. Each yellow one is an actual note. There's blue for people here, green for locations. And so it scans through all of the notes and generates this dynamically. And so if I were to make a couple more notes with, other characters or logs or whatever, all that stuff shows up on the graph. And then you can navigate through the records here by clicking them. So if you look at which record is selected up here, it's changing. All right, so we'll look at the code on this one. And that will be it. That's the last one. We'll do the Markdown editor first. So let's see, I'm using Vue for the Markdown editor, so I import that. Marked.js is for the Markdown editor itself. And then Prism.js is for displaying Markdown with code syntax highlighting. So this does support code blocks, and if you go to type a certain language, this one will display it. In this case, I'm using Prism instead of CodeMirror, and I found that you don't have to install all those extra packages for each language. Prism will display it. So it's not a full code editor, but it will do the syntax highlighting without having to import a bunch of different libraries. This one has, let's see, the Markdown one. Yeah, this doesn't have too much CSS. That's just the two containers there. And then I'm using Vue to conditionally show and hide the preview pane and the Markdown side, or switch to the full editor mode or whatever. Let's see, there's importing the libraries, initializing. And then here is where I'm rendering the Markdown. So there's raw text coming in. You run marked on it with that Markdown value, and then it shows it in the preview part. And then Prism highlight all. This takes the second library. So the first one takes raw text, turns it into rendered, formatted Markdown, but it's still all going to be one color. And this will take the code blocks and then highlight them. I got a function to toggle the mode and a function to save, and that's it for that side anyway. And then on the crazy graph part, this is using Viz.js or Viz Network. So that's the library being used to display all of the nodes and edges. Then I have a ton of crazy CSS in this one. I was using AI to write it, just experimenting, and I asked it to make a background of stars that were like random, and so no functionality here. It's just some crazy stuff for looks. Not much on the HTML, just a couple, like the frame of it or whatever, and some background color stuff. So same trick I'm using pretty much everywhere else, substituting in a value on the HTML with SQL, and then splitting that out and parsing it. And then this particular library, it takes an array of nodes and edges. And I'm using a new set to deduplicate them and then map over it. And as I'm mapping over the data, pushing a new object to the nodes array. And then the same thing with the edges, map over that data, push it to the edges array. And then lastly, the library itself, let's see, here I'm building the options for it. So like what colors I want to use, what line size, all that stuff. All of this is just building up the config. And then when you actually initialize it, it's really simple. It's just give it an element. So grab this element with the ID of network and create a new network using Viz network. And then here's the element to use, here's the data, and here are the options. And so that turns that empty div into a display of all of those nodes. I added a resize so that, as you resize the app, the whole map will re-render. And then one function to select a record when you click it, and then tell FileMaker to navigate to that record. So That is it, guys. That's the last one. So,
Well, wow. I have to say, just wow, that's amazing the stuff you can do with the web viewers. I have a question as a person who doesn't deal with this very much. You're downloading all these libraries to help display all this stuff. Does that introduce any security risks with it?
I mean, I suppose it depends on the library, but it's going to run isolated in a web viewer. So, you know, unless it's something that can take the data you pass into the web viewer and send it home somewhere, right? Like, yeah, I'd be cautious about where I download a library from, but when it's something commonly used, yeah, I trust the NPM, you know, package that I'm downloading it from. You can also save the raw text of the script in FileMaker so that you don't have to import it from a remote site. So that's going to help with the file being able to run offline and also with security. Because there have been instances of a previously secure hosted CDN, you know, library that gets hijacked, and then they change what gets downloaded, and suddenly something that used to work and was safe isn't, you know. So you can mitigate that by downloading the entire library and storing it in FileMaker instead of having that one line to import it. Just substitute it in, and I have done that. Actually, I guess I have one. I don't have any collection here. I've got one that converts. It creates JSON without needing to loop through all of the records or have the file hosted. So like it's really easy to get your data as JSON if the file's hosted on a server and you can use the API. Or you can use all of the set JSON element methods and go through in a loop, but then that's kind of cumbersome. So I use the JS library to do the same thing, but I downloaded the entire library and stored it in a text field. And so it's totally possible. It's just you know, you got to be able to store it somewhere that is accessible, whether you're online or if you want it to work offline, then you'll have to store it in FileMaker. But yeah, good question.
So that would increase your security if you had it stored locally and then you only introduced a new updated version after you tested it.
Right.
So, but then that's on you for the maintenance of that rather than just reaching out every time you run it.
Yeah.
So, okay, that answers that question. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions?
I just have a comment. Joseph, I don't know what's more impressive, your session or your guitar collection, but I like them both.
Thanks.
I really enjoy, you know, there are times when we do demonstrations and sessions here where we go really deep on one thing, you know, this deep customer need or whatever. It's so nice to see a fan approach to like, wow, here I did this, I did this, I did this. It really stretches the imagination of things that we can do, and I think you did a really nice job of that. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, we really appreciate your being here with us. Does anyone else have any comments, questions? Okay, well,
I'm too
thank you.
busy downloading everything from GitHub.
Oh.
Awesome. That's what it's there for.
Right?
Yeah, super awesome, really.
Okay.
Cool. Well,
Yes,
thanks for having me.
encourage everyone to download those examples and play with them. And we know where to find Joseph now to ask him questions.
Yeah, if anybody has anything you're wanting to do in a web viewer or with an API or AI, feel free to reach out.
Okay, great. So, all right. Well, I'm going to stop the